Although we are sharing this year's events virtually, the festival is based in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and we respectfully acknowledge the land on which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, whose culture has been lost forever and can never be recovered. We also acknowledge the island of Uktahumguk, Newfoundland, as the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq, and we acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Innu of Ntsinan, the Inuit of Nunatsiavut, and the Inuit of Nunatuhavut. We recognize all First Peoples who are here before us, those who live with us now, and the 7 generations to come. As First Peoples have done since time immemorial, we strive to be responsible stewards of the land and to respect the cultures, ceremonies, and traditions of all who call it home. As we open our hearts and minds to the past, we commit ourselves to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tara Taylor, Festival Director at the Emerging Lands Cultural Film Festival. We're talking here today about current audience trends, including but not limited to pandemic audience habits, and also the need to diversify audience outreach and identification. We have with us today Nicole McControversy of Night Stream. It's an online collective of US genre festivals who banded together to make one digital super festival in 2020. Aude Renaud Laurent, Director of Cinema Public in Montreal, and Joan Jenkinson, joining us to share some early insights based on Black Screen Office's race-based audience study currently in process. Welcome again today from the St. John Women's Film Festival. I'd like to open the floor up just to ask the panelists, how are audience trends and outreach presenting themselves after 2 years of us living in this pandemic? Anyone can jump in.
It's I think of course, like at Cinema Public, we had a special situation because we started the project in April. So meaning we started in the middle of the second wave here in Canada. And so we had this big discussion of saying, is it the right time to create an audience for this future project of sharing film and diffusing film and talking about culture. And then we kind of told ourselves that it would be a good moment, in fact, because it's a moment where audiences need to get in touch, need to reach out, and art is a way to do so. And of course, through the pandemic, people felt a lot of loneliness, of exclusion, and then we thought that art might be maybe a solution to that. So we started online, but then after, and I want to let the other panelists continue, but it's difficult to start and build an audience only online when you don't have previously an audience that was built related to a film festival that is already happening, or a theater or a group. And I'm curious to hear Nicole, who has this, I imagine, fan base of people who were following, and then what was their reaction when they decided to go online. And then Joanne also, because Joanne is a bit, I imagine, the same situation as me, being you don't have like a physical place where people meet. It's more of an online group for people to exchange and to discuss.
I'll jump in. Yeah, so we're like coming from the opposite direction, a physical festival, very small, very regional. And then, we actually had to cancel our physical event within days of the pandemic becoming a national crisis, an international crisis rather. And so we decided, okay, we cancel and we wait and see, because it was too soon for us to do any sort of pivot. We're an extremely tiny, under-resourced organization. So we wait 5 months or so, and then some of the other festivals sort of approached us, and we start talking about doing sort of a super group film festival online, something none of us had ever done. And it just sort of came together within 2 months of just very vigorous planning, and we had no idea really what we were doing. And just sort of using your best educated guesses to kind of figure out how to do outreach virtually to an entire country. While we had different regions that each festival represented from like the four corners basically of the US, it's the attendance from those regions was surprising. It wasn't exactly our built-in audiences that showed up. It was audiences that we'd never had captured before. So we're not quite sure how that happened, but as we're facing our second edition next month, we have some data to inform some of our outreach strategies. But maybe we'll get into that in a little more depth later. I feel like I want to hear more about Joan's organization.
So the Black Screen Office was born out of the pandemic and what I call the largest civil rights movement of all time. And so when we started, we quickly realized that it's really difficult to move forward because there's no data, like national data on who our audiences are, what they want to consume. So we realized that in terms of audience measurement, we needed to know who are the Black, Indigenous, and people of color in Canada. We have very, very shallow data on the audience characteristics and the demographics of who's out there. And we know very little about what their media preferences are, like why they watch, how much they watch, and where they're watching it. And then we have, again, minimal understanding of their attitudes, preferences, to see greater representation on screen. We're assuming it, but we don't know it. So we thought that, our goal would be through credible data and insights into the audience preferences and behaviors and attitudes, that we'll be able to empower underrepresented groups to move towards a greater confidence to drive change. But we don't think the change can come without the data. We need to know where we're starting from.
Yes, well, the data is definitely important. So I know that for Screen Nova Scotia over here on the East Coast, we just finished up a research data report for the crew, like film crew, and diversity in the film crew. So I mean, definitely, I believe it needs to happen all across the board, and our audiences as well. So if we're now pushing for more inclusive films and screenplays and whatnot, then those audiences are going to come from, they're going to come out of the woodwork in new places. So just thinking about and keeping in mind the traditional ways of building an audience, like surveys and social media outreach and cross promoting with other festivals. Can you all speak to just maybe did some of those traditional ways of outreach and building an audience come to mind? It's quite different online than it is in building in person, for sure.
Again, maybe I'll start because I'm coming from the more theoretical place, and really it is, we actually need to figure out who that audience is. We need to look at capturing it. We need to know, their identity and how they see themselves in terms of their identities as Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and people with disabilities and LGBTQ2+ communities. Like, who are they and how do they self-identify? And what role does media play in their immediate environment, but as well as in the larger context, which is where a film festival would take us into that larger context. Not just film festivals, but also, just film and television consumption in general, screen media consumption. And then we need to know how they interact with that content. So again, they're, Ode and Nicole are looking at film festivals in a very specific way, but we need to also look at, what devices people are watching things on. Are they using the internet more? Has the pandemic changed that? How are they using social media, podcasts? That's fairly new. Is that, taking some of the audience away from what would be mainstream television? So again, there's a lot to capture, and I'm going to send it over to Ode and Nicole to talk about really on the ground, more practical things that they're seeing with their festivals.
Yeah, so before starting the, thank you, Johan. Before starting the project, Cinéma Public, I was working in a neighborhood cinema, little neighborhood cinema, where we had the chance to meet the people on site, where we had the chance to talk to the customer, where you had the chance to take the pulse of the population. So it's true that we didn't have much data on who was coming to the cinema, but at least we could talk to them, which was great. And then with the new project, like the whole team of like basically of a cinema just shifted to a team that is well organized, where everybody has their function, where we don't have that much to do audience outreach, because we have basically the public that is around the cinema, that the neighborhood around that is coming, and you can go and see, go like talk to the school next to the cinema and organize projects. And then when you shift and you have only online, then the whole team needs to readjust, and then everybody becomes more or less, we all started to learn about a lot of things in terms of communication, in terms of how to analyze all those Google Analytics, and try to learn more about our audience. And the first thing we realized is that we don't know. It's the same as you did, as you said. We don't know who we're talking to, and who are, like, where are they, who are they, and how can we also reach people that might be not in the first place interested by our programming, but if we basically do the effort of going to see them, and then they might also be interested. So we all shifted our way of doing things and oriented ourselves towards communication, towards marketing, towards strategy. And it was a very interesting learning curve. And I think slowly we're still in the process of trying to understand better who is our audience, but I think we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, with us, we just don't have the data on the national scale. Like, we don't know how our audience self-identifies at all. You know, each festival might do surveys, but as like a giant super group, we did not do a survey. We're just too small and under-resourced, and you know, none of us, it's just, when you're doing like all of the things, it was just like an extra thing that I thought was very important, but just we didn't have the capacity to do it. So we all know our regional audiences more or less, but on the national, after we did our first national event, we found an enormous audience coming out of Los Angeles and Austin, where none of our festivals operate. And actually those were the largest groups overall, which was really surprising. And we just sort of figured that it must be that this is, you know, genre fans, you know, are interested in the films. They keep, you know, tabs on the pulse of, you know, what's out there. So I feel like they came to us rather than us reaching out to them. Though we did do a lot of social media outreach, and we have a couple of people, you know, whose job that is on our team. We all come from the genre space, and those communities in these different regions that we each component festival did not have a specific presence in, we still reached them because of their interest in the content that we show at our event. But it's still like a lot of like mysterious science to me, and the other thing that I'm most passionate about but clueless about at the same time is how to reach a younger audience on in the virtual space. Like, where, you know, we joke about it because we're all like of a certain age. We're all, you know, in our late 30s, mid 40s, and we're always like, where are the kids? What are they doing? How do they do things? And, you know, I'm always like, they're on TikTok, you know. How do we reach them? Do they even watch films? We don't know. Like, so it's, yeah.
Yeah, we have, if I can just bounce on this, we have the same questions, because we know they are there. We know they're close to us. We know they're on social media, but like, how can we interest them in a kind of a programming that is created and created by programmers that know what they're doing and all of that. And so it's very difficult. But it's true that at the same time, we realized something also interesting, that we were people that were interested in our programming that came from outside Montreal. And this was a bit like you, some a kind of we were very first, we didn't expect it because we know that our circles are more around Montreal. But then we were really heavily surprised when we realized that with our online programming, I think we were around 30%, like very like what we can see on, for example, Vimeo, were coming from outside Montreal. So this was interesting because then you kind of break this kind of separation between city, very dense city with a lot of cultural events, and outside where people have less access to those films. And yeah, so that was an interesting, definitely a positive aspect of this like digital shift we had.
I'm working with a young group, a young group of social media people who are helping us as a new organization to reach the younger audiences. And I'm just amazed at the ideas that they come up with. It's like, oh, okay, you just go and do that because that sounds really great. But they're talking about, I'm from, traditional mainstream media and like film and television, and they're like, well, our age group is also creating content, but we're doing it on YouTube, we're doing it on TikTok, and we're doing IG Live events, and they're like, so they're like curators themselves. They're saying, well, if we approach these 3 influencers for this particular content, we can pay them this amount of money and they'll be able to get this much. It's a whole different approach to audience development. So we've come up with this little campaign called My First Break, because we think it's like a leveling thing, whether you're senior or emerging, you all started somewhere. So we have these video clips that they came up with that we're sending out there to raise awareness of our organization. But at the same time, we're learning like how to communicate with that demographic, which is really exciting. It's like a completely different model from what we're used to doing and seeing. So.
Yeah, that's, oh my goodness, that's such a good point, Joan, because I mean, you definitely need to consider whom you're presenting to when you're developing a new festival, a new anything, to attract and, converting your audience and whatnot, converting audience members. You need to consider, those navigating the content online, like you mentioned, and those who are veterans. So I just wonder what do your promotions look like? And, speaking about the YouTube aspect, like I even think of gaming, when the young folk are doing gaming, there's all kinds of ads that pop up, and maybe you all could be creating, ads that pop up during those gaming content, because they're there as well, right? And so can you speak to that, like what your promotions actually look like? Are they vibrant? Are they appealing to those audience in your promotions as well?
Well, maybe I can start because we have a community that we're building. I guess it's similar. I guess we're all building communities for our various endeavors. So again, we're so new. We're starting from scratch, but we do have a very targeted audience. We know that we are reaching out to Black people who work within the screen industries across Canada. So in addition to this study that we're doing, we're planning to do a market analysis survey that will look at who are all the Black people within the industry all across Canada. Where are they in their careers? What successes have they had? What failures have they had? What professional development is available? What's not available? What they need? Just to do a really deep dive on who it is that we hope to serve. And as I sort of embarked on this journey, I started getting funding for it because everybody's saying, well, we all need that information. We are now saying we are focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but if you don't know who you want to include, then then you're just kind of walking around blind. So so that's kind of one of the things that we're doing, in addition to really building up our social media presence on all platforms. And for me, really appreciating that, how these new methods can really have much broader reach and bringing new audiences that we never even thought, that we didn't know was out there.
Joan, your organization's at a huge advantage because of its newness. You're not contending with sort of entrenched old habits that won't die. And I think that's a problem with a lot of genre festivals, but probably that seems to resonate maybe with festivals beyond the genre space. And so trying to think, outside of how it's been, or, who's been showing up, is one of the many challenges for us dinosaurs. In terms of like our sort of mega group social media outreach, it's definitely different than each component festivals. It's I feel like it's more egalitarian. I think it's more appealing to all sides of gender identity spectrum. And instead of, I feel that a lot of horror-centric festivals, by some of the content, automatically sit in this sort of unintentionally or intentionally misogynistic space. And there's so much more content out there that is broad, diverse, dynamic, and there are more than just white men who like horror in the world. So our content is lifting up, or our social media strategies, like lifting up all the women filmmakers, or women identifying filmmakers, filmmakers of color, and also, not really emphasizing like the gore elements of it, because the festival is not specifically horror. There's some festivals in our group that have horror as like a, like sort of their main thing. And then there's festivals like mine, which is Boston Underground, and then like North Bend. We like weird stuff that's not necessarily horrific or anything, just sort of weird, contemplative, moody stuff. And
not necessarily all women getting
exactly. That's like a huge thing for me, is like, that is not content I really like at all, and my audience does not like it either. And so balancing it with really thought-provoking stuff, sometimes transgressive by women identifying filmmakers, because of course those stories also should be told. But so as Nightstream, coming up with a strategy that represents all of us, represents what we're celebrating, and then doing it on social media. But the new thing that we're trying this year, so I have no data to back up whether it's going to be successful or not, is we are going to do some adverts with podcasts, because we've noticed also that kind of blew up in a big way during the pandemic. So we are, our team's coming up with which podcasts, to reach out to set up agreements with, to kind of reach that audience that we're still not able to reach.
Okay, I just want to stay on, Nicole, your point that you had said, my audience doesn't like it either. So to me, that sounds like you know your audience very well. So I just wonder if you thought about doing the same outreach to new audience members that fit in that same avatar, if you will, to your current audience base, and finding where they are online or whatnot. So maybe in some forums or whatnot, because it sounds like for the ones that already currently have audiences, that it's very niche. And yeah, like maybe you don't have to reinvent any wheels, but just, like finding more folks like that. So I just wanted to see if you could speak on that a little bit more.
Yeah, so that's a little tricky, only in that I think when we formed Nightstream, we didn't have it in our minds that this is going to be a permanent festival. This is sort of just to kind of survive the pandemic event. Yeah. And we weren't sure we were going to do it this year. And then a couple months ago, we were like, I guess we should do it again. But I don't know that we have a longevity in mind, for future editions or not. It is a lot of work to have two festivals, a year, basically, because we all do want to return to physical events, because for at least our audience, the Boston Underground audience, like the physical proximity, the community, the sense of community, meeting in the theater that we host at, that's the biggest part for our audience. That's the most meaningful part of it for them and their experience. In terms of like their likes and dislikes. So, I mean, I say that based on audience voting, which is a lot easier to capture in person, which I was surprised by. I thought, sending a survey, that should just be so easy, but no one actually wants to fill in online surveys. So I have a sense of what their likes and dislikes are based on years of their voting on the films that we show. And then I guess trying to expand on that into how you would do like a social media or online kind of outreach. I guess that would be reduced to keywords. So maybe looking for those particular film titles that they really resonated with them, and like trying to build like an audience profile based on movie titles. Although I feel it's too specific and too niche, because a lot of the films that we show are super like no one's heard of. So I would love to try to build a profile around that, but I think that actually already has a challenge ahead of it. Is like, how do you say like, oh, we like queer samurai slasher film, like from Germany. So
Thanks. And so I thought, oh, maybe you had something that you wanted to add earlier. Or?
No, but yes, it was simply to jump on the question regarding advertising. We've done like advertising on social media, but I always have some kind of something reluctant in me of like giving money to Facebook, giving money to all of those big companies. I think it's like at the opposite of what we want to do. Like we like little organization like ours, like we struggle. We want to pay the artists. We try as much as possible to have this close contact with the community and be thankful also for the people that are giving back to us by attending our events, by being there. And I think like giving money to those big corporations is like, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, why do we do this? So sometimes we're doing it a bit so we can try, and because we're interested into trying new things. But I think like recently we've been more thinking of, because now we are also doing in-person screenings in a theater in Montreal. So we have this kind of dual activity, digital and also in person. And I think we want a bit of put aside this idea of like buying ads on those big websites, and more using those websites, but in what they are good for, meaning like this kind of network of community, and going to a specific group, asking them to share a news, going to another group, giving to the organization maybe a pair of ticket. And so it's taking, of course, a lot of more time, and it's very little step by little step, but I feel way more comfortable with this kind of approach.
Oh, can I ask you to explain a little bit more about what kind of programming your festival does?
Yeah, of course. So in fact, it's not really a festival. We're more of a like cinema, but since we started without having an address, we're kind of this, we describe ourselves as this like itinerant cinema that is going in different places. So we started online, and we are still also online. But then in the summer, we did a special series of projection, all of them with guests, in an outside venue. It was a collaboration with an art center, the Livard. And then as of September 1st, we just opened this very, very micro cinema in the north of Montreal, close to Villeray, Little Italy. We're talking of 40 seats normally, but now with COVID restriction, 26. And then we're programming different stuff. We're programming new releases. We're programming also classics. We're doing, our plans, of course, is also to do retrospective. We like the idea of inviting creators and artists. We had a ciné-concert, a performance with musicians recently. So it's really the idea of how can we now, we have this in-person theater, but then how can we kind of have a double audience. We have this digital audience, as I said, that has this expanded outside Montreal, which is great. And then we also have this new audience around the cinema. So now we need to find a way to kind of, I don't know, to mix them up in a certain way. So maybe we're trying to, we would like our programming to be more coherent between, for example, in theater and online, so we can have discussion. So we can have discussion maybe inside the theater, but maybe also stream them. Anyway, we need to find a way to get all of those people together, and that's a big difficulty, because what we realize also, and it's interesting. Just a quick thing is, I realized when we opened the cinema, we spent all those weeks and months basically doing everything social virtually. And then we had people from the neighborhood coming in and saying like, oh, can I buy tickets? And then we all, when we're just like walking and we're not, the ticketing system is not like set up, we're kind of, oh, go on our website. And then people are sometimes, because they're older, they say, oh, but I don't have internet. So then,
wow.
And of course, and then my thought was like, it's interesting because digital includes, but also excludes. So we need to be on both. We need to be everywhere, I guess. We need to be digitally, but there are some people who are still not at ease. And of course, we're talking also of economic disparities. It's definitely related to that. So if as a neighborhood cinema, we want to kind of break as much as possible those disparities and bring all the people together, then doing maybe only online is maybe not also the best option. But it's interesting. I think we need to do both.
Yeah, so definitely the hybrid events will help you. I think you're right, capture both of those audiences. And I don't know if this is taboo to talk about, but I mean, just thinking about the pandemic habits and the trends of folks coming back to in-person when, you know, it's decided about the passport, the vaccination passport, you know, what is that going to look like for the habits of folks that used to come in person, that, you know, who's on either side, you know, those vaccinated, those not. So can we speak a little bit to what you feel those trends may look like if that's put in place?
I actually saw TIFF do it this year because they had a hybrid in-person and online presence, which they both I thought were exceptional. And because they had to reduce the number of people attending in the theaters, it made checking the vaccine status of people who were coming in. It didn't hold things up because there were far fewer people who were actually coming into the theaters, and then there was, you know, social distancing within the theaters. So it was nice to get, you know, some of that in-person experience, just to have that festival vibe. But then when, you know, you can't see everything, and I felt like the online experience really enhanced it, because then the time that I would have spent traveling to the venues, I could actually spend, you know, watching 2 or 3 films online. So the combination, I thought, worked really well. I think Aude already spoke in detail about that.
Yeah,
I was kind of
Nicole,
what she said.
Yeah, I'm not
Nicole, did you wanna
sure.
add?
I'm just not sure because, you know, with a decision like that, when we go back to physical, you know, that would be up to our venue. And I trust that our venue, you know, takes a lot of that, you know, like, you know, takes everything into consideration. You know, it's a very vibrant local nonprofit, you know, arts theater. And we would go with what, you know, they prefer. We always take their directions. So, you know, not to kind of pass it on to them, you know, but like we do have to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know that there are some people in our community that are very unhappy about this development, and I don't know what to say to them. I really don't.
Yeah. I mean, and it is unfortunate. But I mean, it's been unfortunate for the last 2 years. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a thing. But I wonder too, just going back again at this to this idea of I love the creating the avatar thing for building audiences and that kind of thing. Do you think it would be helpful for you and even especially for your audience study, Joan, to just do helpful activities to do that? Because it sounds like with your My First Break, it sounds like you've kind of moved to try something like that? Like, do you think doing those kind of activities would help, um, I guess, cultivating that perfect audience or getting them over to to your
I think
screenings?
I think before for us, before we get there, we really need to look at what the content preferences are across the country. Do we see people valuing diversity and representative stories? Are there, what's happening now? What are the gaps? What are the impact of those gaps that we see? So it's really at the end of the day about content. What do we currently have available? What drives people to that content? What the importance of representative content? It's about who's making it, who owns the IP, and then it's about what's the desire out there for alternative content, and what that would look like. What would it be, and what impact would it have on viewing habits of the people who are saying they want it? So, and then it's about expectations about who is going to be driving these changes. Um, Making content is, as we all know, it's like a massive, very, very expensive, speculative business. So it takes a lot of money. It takes, getting access to those funds locally and internationally. So there's so many things that come into it, but we need to know that at the core of that content being created is that we have a value of creating authentic and inclusive content, and that we need, I think, in our study to provide the evidence that there is a desire there, and that when it's available, it's going to change viewing habits significantly. And that it's also a good business model, that having that kind of representation, diversity, authenticity, news stories, unique stories, that I believe is what people are looking for, but we want to be able to bring the evidence to the industry.
Right, right. And it's so important. Everyone wants the data. Some of us don't need it, others want it and insist on it. And it's good to have, just to show funders we have the proof. Yeah, it's amazing. So this has been, oh my goodness, such a rich conversation, and just full of, I feel excited and hopeful, and because like I said, I keep thinking of the new opportunities for creators and whatnot, and then where their audiences currently are, and bringing them in, to the forefront. And just also thinking, like, I guess, analytically, like all like the websites like create these analytics. You can go to Google Analytics, that kind of thing. So just keeping in mind, like, have you folks kept in mind that way of who's ever clicking on your websites and on your social media, is just kind of keeping track of that information to see, oh, because I always find it interesting when I look at mine, I see the world map. I'm like, what? Somebody in Poland looked at visited our social media. So what do you think around that? Like, maybe trying to collect some to I guess delve into that information, those analytics.
I think there's no accident about some of those things. They're real strategies around, how to make something go viral. As I was saying, my young staff were talking about, getting influencers on board who have big networks and who can, get your message out to places that you never even thought of. Those are, to me, those are all new methods, and certainly, as you say, they're analytics that can track it. But I think it's like an exciting new frontier that really is, that will help us to grow our audiences.
Yeah, we need to use the data that is now available for us to now that we know, we can change things. And I think John, it was really interesting also when you said we need to know more about this, about the person. We need to know more about the audiences, because it will be the base of change also, because as you said, without knowing, you're clueless. So you cannot necessarily have like concrete action. So I think we are still in the process. Yeah, we're in the process of using all of those tools. Sometimes it's difficult because there's so many tools. You need to focus on some of them and then get an expertise also to help you in this analysis. And I love this idea of having a young team working and helping you creating buzz, because I think we all feel a bit sometimes disconnected in a way, because there's so many things out there, so many networks where we can reach different audiences.
I completely agree, and I actually think wouldn't it be amazing if there could be some educational resources for organizers, no matter their age or experience with technology, to learn how to do some of this stuff, or if we could, I don't know, put some emphasis within our, like the festival community of getting some folks, skilled up in these areas. Because a lot of us, are tiny staffs, and some of us have to do all of that, right? So, you have to go pick the people up at the airport, do the program, and you need to figure out Google Analytics.
Let's get interns, people who are still in school,
but then
really are like amazing at this stuff. So.
I mean, yes, but then that knowledge never like trickles upwards. Yeah. And it leaves with them when they eventually leave.
Yeah. And I heard the word dinosaur used before, so it just automatically made me think of CBC GEM. So like, and that is CBCs, so they obviously have know that who their audience base in person was. I mean, obviously they're on TV too, so it wasn't too hard to go over to and bring an audience to CBC GEM. But I'm sure they had to do a little bit of new marketing, but probably not too much. So that's why I lean back to the thought of like, whomever your current audiences are and who trust in your brand and whatnot, it shan't be too much extra work to draw them in, to draw some new ones in and tell them bring one and bring two. So any final thoughts just around the subject that we've been talking about? It's been so rich.
I think it's an exciting time as we started with the social movement that's happening, our adjustments through COVID, and using what's coming out of COVID, the technology, the different ways of reaching people. I think it's an exciting time. I'm really optimistic about what will come of it moving forward. And I think we just need to make sure that we're starting with real information, that we're not, we can speculate, but then I think we need to start to really get the hardcore data and be really systematic about how we reach those audiences and how we present them to the mainstream.
Yeah, and if I can say also, I think creativity and new ideas emerges often from problems. So I think it's something that has been said a lot during the pandemic, but I think it's true. Since we're faced with something, with a problem, with insatisfaction, then we need to find a creative way to get out of it and find better ways to reach the audience we want, and to have an audience that is also, that express also in terms of, we want to have a diversified programming, a programming that express diversity. So let's also try to reach also this diversity in terms of audience.
I want to kind of be unconventional and throw in an anecdote that I didn't know how to work into this conversation, although I feel like now I can, but I apologize if it seems sort of random for me to mention it. One of the interesting aspects of organizing an event online throughout all this is the creativity that has provoked. And so one of the observations we had all made, watching a bunch of festivals early on in the pandemic, pivot to online was, we attended a lot of these things, and there was just this sort of missing aspect, and we couldn't put our finger on it for a while. And then it became obvious, it was, the physical proximity, the mixing, the just having the conversations with filmmakers and your fellow, audience people. And so Nightstream, through some vigorous online research, kind of came across a platform called GatherTown, which it's like a social media platform that's proximity based. And it's sort of, you wander around an 8-bit video game world with a little avatar. And the way it works is when your little avatar walks up to another little avatar, it triggers your camera and microphone to turn on, and you can have conversation with them. And the discovery of this and the unveiling of this, for Nightstream 2020 was a huge eureka moment for us, because it's almost like the people attending felt like more excited about that than the films at times. And then just sort of, monitoring that space and hearing the conversations in there, like a lot of people felt like this was like this moment they could finally reconnect with people, even if it was virtually. It felt real and organic, and that thing that we are all missing from physical events. And so that ended up being really successful. And then a lot of festivals since have been kind of going into that virtual space, trying to create these places for people to mingle. But at the same time, that does create, accessibility issues, again, with people with internet or the right technology, because some of these platforms have those limitations. And then just as like a final observation on my own audience attending, we all got so excited about it and assumed everyone would just want to jump in and do this, but the turnout was not nearly as exciting as we expected. And even though the bar is very low for setting it up, you just click a link. That's basically it, and you're in. That proved to be really challenging for a lot of people in our audience. Although there were a lot of younger people, so maybe there's something there to observe.
That's amazing, Nicole. Thanks for mentioning that. I remember AFCOOP Film Festival, they actually did something similar to the Gather Town. So you would be inside of it, and you could you could sit at the couch, you could go to the bar, and yeah, it was quite amazing. They called it something like a garden party, so it was kind of cute. But I thank you so much. I thank you, Nicole, Joan, and Ode for joining us in this discussion on audience habits and trends here at the St. John Women's Film Festival. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.